Flacco. If you were somebody else in the league, Canty, and again, talking to Chris Canty here on the Stephen A. Smith Show on ESPN Radio, and you had the opportunity to go after Odell Beckham Jr. or Antonio Brown, both now potentially on the trade market, and we understand why we're talking about Odell in this respect, who would you rather have the opportunity to bring into your team?
Well, give me the younger player, Will. I mean, Listen, Odell is, in his mid-20s. AB is, at 30 years old. So, I mean, I look at that as a situation as I'm going to have Odell for more years than I am Antonio Brown. Now, Antonio Brown has been the most productive receiver in the National Football League this decade. But, I mean, you can make an argument for both players on being the best at their position. But, I mean, it's a situation where, look, I don't know where AB's headspace is at. I mean, he's got some off-the-field allegations now that the NFL is probably going to look to investigate. You don't know what's going to come of that. So I would feel more comfortable trading for Odell Beckham Jr., even understanding that the price is going to be a little bit steeper in terms of what I'm going to have to send back to the Steelers. But I would feel more comfortable with Odell.
Chris Canty, former New York Giant, host on ESPN Radio New York here on the Stephen A. Smith Show with Will Cain. I got to get to one more thing with you before I lose you. What did you think of the Denver Broncos making a trade for Joe Flacco from the Baltimore Ravens yesterday? Flacco's the first domino to fall before Foles, before Bridgewater, before anyone else. What do you think about the Broncos prioritizing Flacco?
Well, I thought it was a solid deal for both sides. When you look at it from the Denver perspective, I think that John Elway gave himself a little bit of insurance, knowing that, he probably wasn't going to be able to get Nick Foles from Philadelphia. I know there was some conversations earlier in the week that they had, but then they realized the price in terms of draft capital was going to be a little bit too steep. So I think that John Elway went with the move and got himself another bridge quarterback. I mean, you can compare what Joe Flacco has done the last 3 years to what Case Keenum has done, but I think from a physical tools perspective, Joe Flacco represents a little bit of an upgrade at the position. But John Elway still got to figure out who's going to be the long-term solution at the quarterback position. From the Ravens, I think it makes sense. Listen, Joe Flacco was going to count a lot of money toward their cap. They get to save roughly $10 million on their cap, and Lamar Jackson is firmly entrenched as the starting quarterback there. He doesn't have to look over his shoulder. So I think the deal makes sense for both sides.
All right. I could not disagree more, by the way. But I'm going to have to let you go.
Well, it wouldn't be the first time that you're wrong. So, I mean, I get it.
Well, okay, they're to tell me I can go with you one more question. So then let's do that head-to-head. Man, I can't make any sense of John Elway making a move for Joe Flacco, okay? I think you moved from Case Keenum, mediocre, to Joe Flacco, mediocre. Contract values in the same range, which is fairly expensive for a mediocre quarterback. And if you're using him as a stopgap, a bridge quarterback, to a rookie that you're going to draft, Chris, why would you bring in Joe Flacco, a guy who was not about that last year in Baltimore when they were trying to bring along Lamar Jackson? Reports are he wasn't interested in helping. So why would you not just use Case Keenum as your stopgap quarterback? Which, by the way, last year showed those guys usually last about 6, 7, 8 games before they yield to the rookie. Why would you bring in an expensive mediocre quarterback that you had to trade for in Flacco to do that?
Listen, Will, I can understand the argument to be made that Joe Flacco is not worth the hit that you're going to take on your salary cap in terms of what you have allocated at the quarterback position, considering Case Keenum and what his cap number is this season, even if they move on from him. I mean, they're allocating a lot of money. It's upwards of $28 million in cap space toward the quarterback position. So that would be a lot of money to put toward quarterback. But, I mean, ultimately, you have to realize that Joe Flacco is better than Case Keenum. Like, Joe Flacco is a better quarterback than Case Keenum. I know it's hard to make that argument with the numbers, but, I mean, I played with Joe Flacco and I played against Case Keenum. It's an easier game plan going up against Case than it is Joe Flacco. So, I mean, from John Elway's perspective, he doesn't know that he's going to be able to put himself in position to get his next franchise quarterback. So I think this gives him a little bit of insurance in case he can't get his guy. It gives him more flexibility at the top of this year's draft. He doesn't have to lock in on a guy that he doesn't necessarily believe in with that 10th overall pick. So again, I look at John Elway sending a 4th-round pick to the Baltimore Ravens as insurance and as an upgrade in terms of the bridge that you're going to use to get to your next franchise guy.
All right, man. Well, I'm glad we got to do it face-to-face, or at least voice-to-voice. Appreciate you jumping on with me today. Always enjoy talking to you, Chris.
Thanks for having me, Will.
That's Chris Canty, former New York Giant, former Dallas Cowboy, former Baltimore Raven, and host on ESPN Radio in New York. All right, that's been Straight Talk, brought to you by Straight Talk Wireless, nationwide coverage on America's largest and most dependable 4G LTE networks. Russell Westbrook and your boy Stephen A. made their case for NBA MVP today. I'm going to tell you coming up why they're both wrong on the Stephen A. Smith Show on ESPN Radio and ESPN News.
Learn what affects your credit scores and what you can do to improve them with Credit Karma. Maybe you need to dispute an error in your credit report, or you're paying too much interest. Credit Karma can help with that. Visit creditkarma.com or download the app now. That's creditkarma.com.